All right, so we've gotten a lot of requests to look into this whole birthright citizenship thing,
Yeah.
especially with this executive order from President Trump.
Yeah. It's been in the news a lot.
Yeah, and all the lawsuits popping up, and
Yeah.
you know, we've got some excerpts here from this AP News article.
Okay.
It's called 22 States Sue to Stop Trump's Order Blocking Birthright Citizenship. And I think it's a good place to start, to kind of unpack
Oh, yeah, for sure.
all of this stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a really interesting case study, I think, in how something that a lot of people
Right.
just kind of take for granted. You're born here, you're a citizen.
Right.
That's how it is. But
Right.
globally, that's not the norm at all. And so
Yeah.
to see how one, executive order can throw that all up in the air, it's fascinating.
Absolutely. So for anyone who maybe isn't totally familiar with this whole thing, birthright citizenship basically means that if you're born on U.S. soil, then you're automatically a U.S. citizen.
Right.
Doesn't matter what your parents' immigration status is or anything like that.
Right. And that's, what's really interesting is that the U.S. is one of only about 30 countries that have the system in place. It's
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's not.
I always just kind of assumed
Right.
most countries did it this way.
Yeah, it's very unique to the U.S. And a few others, but most countries base citizenship on the parent's nationality.
Okay.
Or they require some period of residency for the parents, things like that.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's very much rooted in the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution,
Right.
Which was adopted after the Civil War.
Okay.
And of course, that was primarily aimed at ensuring citizenship for formerly enslaved people.
Right.
But the wording of it has had, much broader implications.
So, okay, let's break down this 14th Amendment a little bit more.
Okay.
What does it actually say about citizenship?
Sure. So the key clause states that all persons born or naturalized in the United States
And subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens.
Okay.
And it's that phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof,
Right.
that's become the focal point of this whole debate.
Okay, I see. So how is that phrase then being interpreted in relation to President Trump's executive order?
Well, so the order argues that children born in the U.S. to parents who are not citizens or here illegally are not subject to U.S. jurisdiction.
I see.
So it's essentially challenging the long-standing interpretation of the 14th Amendment.
Okay, and the timing of this is interesting, right? Because it was signed on January 20th, 2025.
That's right.
Inauguration Day.
Inauguration Day, yeah. So it seems like addressing birthright citizenship was a high priority
Yeah.
right out of the gate for this administration.
Yeah.
The order specifically targets children of non-citizens and those here temporarily. The effective date is February 19th, 2025.
Okay.
So that gave about a 1-month window
Right.
for legal challenges.
All right.
And we've seen that.
The response was swift.
Yeah, definitely swift. 22 states,
Yeah.
many with Democratic attorneys general filing lawsuits to block this order. They're calling it an attack on the Constitution, and some of them are really making it personal.
Absolutely. Like Connecticut Attorney General William Tong, he's the first Chinese American elected to that position.
Okay.
He called the lawsuit personal for him.
Wow.
And referencing his own family's immigration history.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it really seems like this executive order kind of struck a nerve
It did.
with a lot of people. But I want to go back to the legal arguments for a second before we get into these lawsuits and the human side of all this.
Yeah.
We talked about the 14th Amendment.
Right.
But there's this 1898 Supreme Court case,
Right.
Wong Kim Ark,
Yeah.
that's been like a cornerstone of birthright citizenship law in the U.S.
Absolutely. It's been a precedent.
For over a century.
For over a century.
Can you give us a quick recap of that case?
Sure. So Wong Kim Ark was born in San Francisco
Okay.
to Chinese parents.
Yep.
He later traveled abroad and was denied re-entry to the U.S.
Wow.
on the grounds that he wasn't a citizen.
Oh, wow.
The Supreme Court ultimately ruled in his favor,
Wow.
affirming birthright citizenship for children born in the U.S., even if their parents weren't citizens themselves.
Wow. Okay, so how does Wong Kim Ark then factor into this current debate?
Well, it's a major...
Is it like a roadblock for people who want to...
It's a major legal hurdle.
Okay.
It's been precedent for over a century.
Yeah.
However, President Trump's executive order tries to reinterpret Wong Kim Ark, arguing that it doesn't apply to children of parents who are in the country illegally. So they're essentially saying that the original ruling didn't intend to cover these situations.
I see. So that's like a reinterpretation of the original precedent.
It is.
Okay. So this seems like this is setting the stage for like a major showdown in the courts that could potentially impact how we define citizenship in America.
It really touches on the balance between presidential power and established legal precedent. And of course, this is all unfolding against a backdrop of very real human stories.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I want to go next with this, because we've got this legal battle brewing. But behind it are real families that are directly impacted. So I kind of want to shift gears now and talk about the human side of this. Starting with one specific case highlighted in the lawsuits. The story of Carmen.
Carmen's story is a powerful example of how this legal battle has real-world consequences.
Let's talk about her situation and what it could mean for other families like hers.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned Carmen's story. It's one of the cases highlighted in the lawsuits against this executive order, right?
Yes. Her case is featured in the lawsuit filed by the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU. She's currently living in the U.S. with a pending visa application. But her partner has no immigration status.
And they're expecting a child, right? So under the current system, their child would be granted automatic citizenship because they were born in the U.S.
Exactly.
But if this executive order were to go into effect, that child's citizenship would be in question.
That's right.
It's it's kind of a tough situation.
This case really puts a human face on the potential consequences for families. The possibility of separation denial, of benefits, just the enormous uncertainty they'd face.
It's really heartbreaking to think about the impact this could have on families like Carmen's. You know, their lives are essentially on hold while this whole legal battle plays out.
Absolutely. It's important to remember that we're not just talking about, you know, abstract legal theories here. We're talking about
real people,
real families and their futures.
Okay, so we've got this landmark case, Wong Kim Ark, affirming birthright citizenship. But now we've got an executive order that's challenging that precedent. And then we have, you know, this very real human impact that this legal battle is having. What are some of the arguments that are being made by those challenging the order?
Well, as we discussed, the lawsuits primarily argue that the executive order is unconstitutional. They say it violates the 14th Amendment's guarantee of birthright citizenship. And that it exceeds the president's authority.
So essentially they're saying that the president doesn't have the power to just change the Constitution.
That's essentially what they're arguing.
Through an executive order. Okay, that makes sense. But what about the other side of this? How is the White House defending this?
Well, the White House's response has been quite interesting. They're framing this as a matter of national sovereignty, arguing that birthright citizenship has been abused and that it encourages illegal immigration. They also say it's unfair to American taxpayers, who they believe are burdened by providing benefits to those who aren't citizens.
So they're really appealing to a sense of fairness and national identity.
Exactly.
And it seems like this is becoming a battle over not just like the letter of the law, but also the spirit and intent of it.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about differing interpretations of the Constitution and what it means to be an American citizen. And it's also about how we as a nation address complex issues like immigration in a way that aligns with our values.
Feels like this debate is like a microcosm of the larger divisions within our society. We see it in the protests that erupted on Inauguration Day. People on both sides, you know, passionately voicing their opinions. And even the White House's response to these lawsuits, calling it the left's resistance and invoking the overwhelming will of the people. It seems like it's almost fueling those divisions further.
It's clear that this issue has become deeply politicized. It's being used to mobilize voters and solidify political bases. And while those tactics might be effective in the short term, they often come at the expense of nuanced discussion and compromise.
So where do we go from here? You know, we've got this legal battle unfolding. Families caught in the crossfire. a nation grappling with these fundamental questions about citizenship and identity.
Right.
What does this all mean for the average person? Just trying to make sense of it all.
Well, it means we're in for a long and likely contentious legal battle.
Yeah.
It means that the lives of countless families like Carmen's hang in the balance
Right.
as the courts grapple with the meaning of the 14th Amendment and the limits of presidential power.
Yeah, we started this deep dive with
Right.
you asking us to unpack this whole thing. And I think we've done that. But in a way, it feels like we've only just scratched the surface.
Right. There's so much to consider.
There's so much to consider. We've got the legal arguments,
Yeah.
the historical precedents,
Yeah.
the political motivations, and most importantly, the human impact.
You're right. This isn't a simple issue with easy answers.
Right.
And that's what makes it so important to discuss, to learn about, and to engage with.
So for all of you listening out there, here's something to think about.
Okay.
We talked about the potential legal and political ramifications of this executive order.
Right.
But what about the ethical implications?
Yeah.
I mean, what does it say about us as a nation?
Right.
If we're willing to deny citizenship to children born on our soil simply because of their parents' immigration status.
That's the core question, isn't it?
Right.
It goes beyond legal technicalities and forces us to really examine who we are as a society and what principles we want to uphold.
It's a very complex issue.
Yep.
And this deep dive has really highlighted that many layers to consider.
Yeah.
Hopefully this conversation has given you some food for thought.
I hope so.
And maybe even inspired you to learn more about this and see how it unfolds in the coming months and years.
Yeah, this is just the beginning.
This is definitely just the beginning.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it really makes you think
It does.
about who gets to decide
Right.
what it means to be American.
Yeah. And it forces us to confront, some uncomfortable truths
Right.
about our history and how those patterns might be repeating themselves.
That's a good point, because this executive order and this whole debate, it's not happening in a vacuum.
Right.
It's connected to a very long history of immigration debates and policies in the U.S.
Yeah, a lot of which have been, discriminatory and harmful.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to approach this issue with a critical eye. Considering all of this historical context.
Absolutely.
And the potential consequences.
Yeah.
We started this deep dive with you asking us to kind of unpack this whole birthright citizenship issue. And I think we've done that.
Yeah.
But in a way, it feels like we've only just scratched the surface.
It feels that way. So there's just so much to consider here.
There's so much to consider. We've got the legal arguments, the historical precedents, the political motivations, and then, of course, like we've been talking about, the human impact.
Right. And that's what makes this, so important, because this isn't a simple issue with easy answers.
Right.
That's what makes it so important to discuss, to learn about, to engage with.
So for everyone listening out there, here's something I want you to think about.
Okay.
We talked about the potential legal and political ramifications of this executive order.
Right.
But what about the ethical implications?
Yeah, that's a really important question.
What does this say about us as a nation?
Right.
If we're willing to deny citizenship to children born on our soil simply because of their parents' immigration status.
That's really the core question here. It goes beyond the legal technicalities and forces us to examine who we are as a society and what principles we want to uphold.
Yeah, it's a really complex issue.
It is.
And this deep dive has really highlighted
all the different layers to consider.
All the different facets,
Hopefully this conversation has given you some food for thought. Yeah. Maybe even inspired you to learn more about this issue.
Absolutely.
And how it might all unfold in the coming months and years.
This is a story that's going to continue.
This is definitely a story that will continue.
To develop.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me. It was great to be here.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.